Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. April is Military Saves Month, so for this month's episode, we're going to be talking about different aspects of military saves. There are different obstacles someone in the services has to face financially that differ from the average person. Today, I'll be talking to Phil Anagnostos, who is a member of the Marine Corps and has spent time deployed overseas. Along with answering my questions about different aspects of military saves, Phil also shares some of his personal stories and experiences from being in the military and different challenges you have to face when you're deployed overseas. Phil and I will be discussing creating a will and testament if you're on active service, the breakdown of military pay, how you can budget what's left of your military pay, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Phil. Hi, Phil. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Hi, good morning, Katie. How are you doing?
Good. So thank you for joining me for this podcast this month because April is Military Saves Month. So I guess to start, we'll just talk about active deployment can come with financial uncertainty. So what are some financial aspects of your life you should take care of before you leave for active deployment?
Getting your finances in order, and then for me, was a good power of attorney.
Okay.
Which, to kind of emphasize on that a little bit, I've seen so many Marines just screaming on the other end of a phone at their, significant other, or power attorney, or whomever, because, like, I remember the first time, it was funny and sad, but there was a Marine screaming at his wife because he had no money to buy toilet paper because, people who they trusted their finances to were, family members or significant others, but not really financially savvy. And it was like a teenager with daddy's credit card.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just burning through the accounts, emptying things out. But then, I've also seen where, relationships end that way too.
Right.
Where they take all the money, clean them out, they're gone, whatever, and that's that. But I guess the biggest thing would be, a good, trustworthy, and also competent power of attorney.
Yeah.
Who can handle all that stuff. But again, that was back in 2009.
Right.
I mean, now you can set up so much things on auto pay or, take care of it online too. So I'm sure that'll actually mitigate some of those issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good point. And, with the auto pay, that's a great way how someone can kind of protect their, make sure things are getting paid on time. So how else can you safeguard your bills and debts before deploying?
The biggest thing for that would be a good budget, which
Okay.
with the military, especially when you're that young and you have that much, in some cases, power or responsibility. We used to call it Superman syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
where especially when a lot of people would come back from deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a huge cultural difference between military and being in the civilian life, where you walk around like you're bulletproof.
Right.
You're the biggest, baddest person in the room. And with that being said, they don't realize or really take in consideration what would be the best way of handling all that stuff. They just don't really care, some of them.
Right.
I mean, I've seen some people get married at 18, 19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
Or when they come back with they have that fat wallet, they weren't spending any money for, 7 months to a year. And I remember at one point, like a month later after returning, you see nothing but brand new Mustangs, Mercedes, like all these crazy cars
Right.
that, 20-year-olds should not be driving around with. But, then they make the decision of buying it like 19% interest or whatever it is because they don't know or care.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they don't know how to spend their money. And it's funny, like we had a lot of checklists and classes and requirements on how to actually handle finances. And, it's almost in one ear, out the other.
Yeah, so I guess just kind of be more aware and then, maybe like take budgeting into more account even before you deploy. So when you come back, it's not, why you're spending your money. So what are different kinds of power of attorney someone can look into if they're leaving for active deployment?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I know they actually, when we get ready to mobilize and all that stuff, I mean, we spent a couple months on the front end before actually was boots on the ground, where we went through all this legal stuff and everything else. So they have good teams set up for that, but they are more or less, I don't want to say secretaries, but they're more the ones who do all the clerical stuff and minimal advising for it. But I mean, it's really something you should know or do. I mean, I was fortunate. I was 21 at the time.
Okay.
I used my mom, who's also an accountant, so I was in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
But I know it's not the situation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but at the same time, though, I think like technology's changed drastically because I had an issue when I was overseas, and part of my issue was between the phone lines and calling out, and like there were a lot of issues with trying to get in touch with it was a credit card company where they wouldn't communicate with my power of attorney, and me in the different time zone and the different phone systems they have over there, finding a way to actually get onto a regular network phone line where I had to get a phone card to pay to call my credit card company at a certain time of the day for me during work hours, or actually during sleep, I think, to call back to the company and authorize them over the phone somehow if they would actually accept my verbal confirmation to allow my mother or my power of attorney to have access to whatever was going on so they could fix it. That took, I think, like a week-long process.
Yeah. That's
But
definitely
again,
something you don't think about.
yeah, but I mean, I really think, or at least I imagine that the technology changes from then to today make that 100 times easier. Granted, you have access to, internet or whatever, wherever you may be. Because I mean, back then, like, we weren't supposed to have cell phones with us, or let me better rephrase that. We were not supposed to be caught having cell phones with us, our personal cell phones. So you can't really use any of that over there, too, at least where I was at. But I mean, they had computer centers and such, or you were able to get internet on a good sunny day where it wasn't raining.
Right.
And like some other crazy circumstances, you were able to get that nearby if you had a laptop that you could jump into Wi-Fi to take care of some of that stuff. And then it moves at a speed almost as fast as 56K. I might be showing my age there a little bit. But yeah, it was just. I think technology today may actually make that a lot easier, but at the same time, with that level of convenience, it might make it easier for someone to get complacent and make uh, poor financial decisions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, should you create a will and testament if you're on active service?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's one thing they made us do. I don't want to say
Right.
made us do,
Right.
but it was highly encouraged but not required type of deal. Which I mean, I had free legal counsel to help me write a will and testament.
Okay.
Like, so, I mean, it was a no-brainer to me. Like,
Yeah, if it's being offered to you, you might as well take advantage of it too.
oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the Marine Corps has, they have lawyers too. I mean, they're not just paper pushers in uniforms who are going to sit there and regurgitate or create policy for you. Like, we do have lawyers. I mean, they come out, they help us out with all that stuff. Actually, I was kind of impressed with everything we did on the front end between that and all the intelligence stuff and all the information gathering. And like, there's a lot of preparation where, looking back at it now, like, some people are 18, 19, like I was 21. Like, it's almost scary where, they prep you with, certain things, like if you were to get captured, what to do about this. Any physical marks or tattoos, they'll document. They do a lot of extensive stuff on the front end before you leave where, should the worst happen, they have as much information already gathered or confirmed to try and identify you, do what they can to, even just certain code phrases or something you might set up.
Right.
Or questions, like just like security questions when you go to log into, you forget your password for, one of the 100 accounts you may have. But yeah, like a will and testament was definitely one of those requirements we did prior to leaving, which I was happy to have had. I mean, even I think to this day, I can still get them to help me write one if I wanted it. But even if you're not in the military, though, it's not a bad idea to have a will and testament ready. Just because, I mean, anybody's time can come at any age in their lives, it's something like that. It's not more for you. It's more for those who are going to have to deal with everything after the fact. And,
Right.
just being prepared for that, it helps out tremendously.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We have some resources on the website about why millennials should even have a will too, just regular millennials. So definitely, I'll put the link for those in the description of this podcast as well. So when you're in the military, how often do you receive paychecks?
It's twice a month, the first and the
Twice a month.
15th usually, unless it falls on a weekend, and it's usually the Friday before.
Okay. So then kind of going along with that, what is the breakdown of what goes into the basic pay slip for the military pay?
I mean, for the basic breakdown, a lot of it comes down to your rank or pay grade.
Okay.
But then there's certain factors that add into that, such as, years in service or time in service. Time and grade, I think, has a slight impact on it too. Also, depending on where you're stationed or where you live,
Right.
if you are entitled to basic allowance in housing or BAH, which so I've been reserved my whole career. I'm still in, actually. So for me, my BAH when I deployed was based on where my home of record was in New Jersey. BAH, you can't be a single person to get it. You have to be married, more or less, because otherwise they'll provide you with on-base housing. But for the most part, those who are married, they get BAH so they can live off base with their families, or I think they can use base housing. I'm not sure. I've never had to experience any of that. But that's a factor as well. Depending where you are, you have your cost of living, per diem and such like that. Some places are way more expensive than others. Good example is I remember. So this is again 2009. I think as an E3 or a Lance Corporal, like my base pay might have been around. I want to say the number 1,600 floats to my head for some reason. I don't know if that was every pay period or every month. Was my base pay. Because I only spent like $150 a month there, so I let everything go straight to the bank account. But like that was my base pay, I think, and I think my BAH was like 1,800 a month, give or take. But then I remember there was this one kid who was from, and he bragged about it, which is just funny. He was from the Chinatown projects of Brooklyn, and his BAH was like $2,400 a month. So I mean, and he was only like 3-4 hours away from me.
Right.
But also even to this day, I talk to some of the guys. So where I'm at now, my current unit, it's a very senior unit, a very senior command. We have a lot of high-ranking, enlisted end officers, where they come from all across the country. And last year, we actually had someone come out and talk to us about, the whole finances and this and that, and the impact of reserve benefits and entitlements. And one of the Marines, he's actually from I think Brooklyn. I know he's a fire chief up in New York. And he told me what his rent or mortgage was. Like, my jaw dropped. I think he spends like $4 or $5 grand a month just on his house. And so he said straight up that he loses money coming down to my current unit's in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So every month he loses money coming down there. But, at that point, it's not about the money. I mean, there's other reasons why we stay in. That's him. Whereas me, like I recently just bought a house, and like my mortgage is nowhere near what he pays.
Right.
I think my annual property taxes are less than what he pays a month on a mortgage.
Okay.
So I mean, it all depends on where. So BAH is there to help, based on where your home of record is.
Right.
Circling back to your question, I hope I didn't dodge it completely.
Fine.
But it's there to help out.
Okay.
Based on where you live, and that's a big factor there too. But
right.
Usually a military installation, they're not in high cost of living areas. But again, it's designed to offset whatever your living costs are going to be. I mean, if you're smart about it and do it right, you'll actually make money still. Like, let's just throw raw figures out there. Say they'll give you $2 grand a month for BAH. You can find a place for like $1,400-$1,500 a month. Where you don't need to carry a pistol with you everywhere you go, let's say. But yeah, it's just if you're smart about it. But that comes down to how good you are with finances.
Right. Right. So you kind of touched on this. So your accommodation could alter the amount or type of pay you received.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to double check. Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know how it works out with dependents.
Right.
I think you do get more if you have dependents. I'm not
Mhm.
sure if, how, or what those multipliers are.
Mm-hmm. So, are there any other deductions made from military pay?
I mean, aside from the taxes and the normal stuff
Right.
that you would anywhere else, some people do have service-connected disabilities
Okay.
or compensation through the VA or Veterans Administration.
Right.
So for me, actually, that I do have. So I have a rating through them
Mm-hmm.
for some issues that I received during my time in service. So actually, for me, so as a reservist, breakdown across the whole year, and this is very, very broad stroke.
Mm-hmm.
You are on some sort of active military status. I don't like to say the word on orders because it's inaccurate,
Mm-hmm.
but you are on a reserve drilling status for let's see, 48 days a year on average, broken apart across your annual training, which typically is 2 weeks, and then your monthly or whatever obligations. Where
Mm-hmm.
the cookie cutter version is 2 days a month, like usually a weekend. That's not always true. Sometimes it's 4 days straight, 5 days straight. Some months you're not there. It really all depends on where you are and what you guys are doing. But so for me, like since I received that and my compensation and pension, so I'm getting paid 48 days a year on average through the Department of Defense. But at the same time, I get monthly compensation from the VA. So in a way, I'm getting paid for 13 and a half months worth of, we call it government work or government pay.
Right.
So for that, I actually have to get a deduction to offset that because, if I don't know when the last time we looked at the calendar was, but there aren't 13 and a half months on one of them.
Right.
So essentially I'm double dipping. So they do take that back. That's personal deduction I have. I know if you have other type of financial obligations such as child support and stuff, just like again anywhere else, that'll be worked out and taken out of your pay. But typically it's as far as deductions go, it's the normal same thing except for maybe like if you're using the chow hall or the cafeteria, whatever you want to call it, mess hall. Sometimes that might be deducted. Now it's on the reserve world. I think mostly in active duty or on bases, you pay outright when you go there.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's kind of standard, like across the board between the military and not being in the military.
Right, regular pay. So then after all the deductions, how would you recommend budgeting what's left of your military pay? Like we kind of said earlier, sometimes people don't necessarily know how to budget what's left their money.
So I'm gonna hop on my soapbox for that question there.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say they don't know how to budget, like I in today's day and age, like I get it. You might not be taught or familiar with how to do it, but at the same time, we had these things, we called them MCIs. There were these tests you had to do. You had to study these books or whatever. I mean, this changed now through technology a bit, where most of it's online now. But in there, and I still kept the book to this day. Where in there it has great financial formulas, like, hey, if this is your net, like this percentage needs to go towards this. This should go towards savings. It is an extensive book where I was blown away. I think I picked that book up when I was 19. But like, there's a lot of great information out there that the military provides for you, but also, it's at your fingertips, even somewhere as convenient as the bathroom with your cell phone, where you can just sit there and look up something and find any answer. One of the things that used to bother me, so especially when we go to the field, we'd always give out a gear list of required items. And on there is, the stuff usually you're issued, all your gear, your clothes, whatever. And, if I didn't put on the gear list something that I didn't think was absolutely necessary, like an e-tool or entrenching tool or shovel, nobody would bring it. And then, if I said, hey, give me an e-tool real quick, or let's grab our e-tools, we'll dig this out. Oh, it wasn't on the gear list. But meanwhile, I see, half the Marines with either cell phones, portable cell phone chargers, cans of dips, cigarettes, lighters, all that stuff. I'm like, well, that crap, and all their snacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, that wasn't on the gear list, but you knew to bring that because you're going to the field.
Right.
So the same thing where they say, well, I wasn't taught or trained how to be financially savvy. Like, well, again, though, you can sit there and tell me about the latest greatest TV show or whatever's going on with, I guess I'm showing my age, like TikTokers, whatever that nonsense is. But they have the access. It's just they don't have the desire.
Right.
To the point where it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, but the military did provide great information on how to budget. I really like. I was really impressed when I first saw that.
Mm-hmm.
So the information's out there, and if not, there's nobody stopping anybody from going out and doing their own research.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's just it all depends on, I would say, case by case, based on what your living personal situation is, family situation. There are some people, they get in because they come from rough upbringings. They're in poor financial situations.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one thing that was interesting to me, because so at least for the Marines, the age cutoff is typically around 27. There's very few waivers for it, but to enlist or go for a commission, like after 27, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in boot camp, we had people from 17 to 26, 27, and some multiple kids, this and that. Finances are okay. I think I knew one guy who was a lawyer. He enlisted when he already had a law degree.
Oh.
So it was just interesting. I actually had a guy in boot camp who was going to be in the Marine Corps band.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just interesting to see all the different walks of life we have there. But it really all depends on your personal situation. But they have so much information out there to really help you out. But it really comes down to the end of the day, someone as an individual being able to determine, one, the difference between their desires and necessities, and being able to actually, make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably the same with kind of like saving too. You have to kind of like look for that information and kind of look it upon yourself to know how to save and budget your military pay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what about credit? Is credit still important when you're in the military?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I mean, for me, and I think it's changed over the past decade or so, where I believe you have to be 21 now to acquire a credit card.
Okay.
Where back when I was at that age, 18 was the age for it.
Yeah.
So I did what I could because I wanted to start building credit at a young age. So I grabbed a credit card. I mean, I used it for things I would normally pay cash for, like gasoline. If I go to Chick-fil-A or something, whatever the case may be. And I always paid it off every month just so I could start working on my credit. And that was something I was doing too when I was deployed. Like I said, I spent like $150 a month. And that was it. And I did it just so I could start paying it and establishing a good credit card history. But I mean, we even have like government travel charge cards where, for the most part now, it's more almost a requirement, where when they help you go through the whole process of applying for it. And you have two options, actually. You have the option of, doing, I think, a lower or reduced credit limit, or you can actually have a credit check run on yourself to be increased for it, where it's not necessarily you paying for it. I mean, the way it's supposed to work out is, you use the government travel charge card or credit card, excuse me, and you'll pay for whatever if you're traveling for training or whatever, and then you'll get reimbursed. That's in a perfect world. It doesn't always happen that way. And that could be on all sides of it, where you don't submit your reimbursements correctly, or the good hand jamming pencil whippers in the administrative section maybe had taken a little bit longer than they needed to do something. But yeah, I mean, credit is just it's not a requirement.
Okay.
It does help just like anywhere else, but I mean, typically, and I used to joke about this all the time. So for me, when I deployed, it was probably one of the easiest times of my life. And when I mean by that is, like, I didn't have to worry about, any of my bills, this and that. Like, it was taken care of. I had, like where I was at in Iraq, it was the very tail end of, our focus in Iraq, and we started shifting everything towards Afghanistan.
Mm.
So actually, like our battalion of Marines, we were actually sent to a big air base in Iraq to actually shut it down or turn it over to the U.S. Army, who would then continue to work with the Iraqi Army. But I was essentially told, when to wake up, go to breakfast, go to work, go to lunch, come back to work, go back home for the end of the day, go to dinner, whatever, and use your own time. Where I spent a lot of it in the gym. But and that was because of my job. Like I was fortunate enough to have that type of routine. But yeah, I didn't have to think too much. So like I jokingly used to say it was like the easiest time of my life. Actually, this is big before Skype or anything was around or just started coming around. I remember I would video chat some friends back home, and one of them made a joke saying it was just like college. Where I was, we laughed about it. I was like, yeah, I was like, sure, whatever. But, I sat there in we called them cans, where essentially it was like a semi-truck trailer converted into 3 bedrooms. There were 2 to a room. So, we joked and called it my dorm, like all that stuff. But yeah, I didn't really have to think. I didn't really have to handle much money. I didn't have to do much. Like I was told pretty much what to do and what my routine would be. And something I did with me and my family where my parents had, I think, 1 or 2, medical procedures here and there, but I told my family, I was like, look, like stuff like that, don't tell me about it till after it happens, because I knew there's nothing I can do about it. I'm a pond throw away, so there's nothing I can do. I'm not going to come back unless it's important enough where I received a phone call from the Red Cross, because usually something went wrong. I mean, what we saw is either someone died or got really sick, or someone had a baby. Okay. That was, the main reason why someone received a Red Cross call. But I told my family too, I was like, hey, don't tell me about anything. Tell me about it after the fact. Which that's when I talk with them or email with them, I was told, yeah, so and so had this. They had a procedure done. They're good. That was a couple weeks ago. And it's the same way that how we have to talk about stuff too. Like we can't talk, hey, I'm getting ready to go do this. I'm getting ready to go out here and go to this. I'm going to be away for a couple weeks. I'm going to be going somewhere else. Like that's something we were told not to talk about. For security reasons, operational security or OPSEC, they call it. Where I remember there were military police or MPs, they were coming into like the gym, the cafeteria, whatever, and they'd grab service members and you'd see them walking out in handcuffs because a lot of times they're doing something stupid like posting to Facebook, like, hey, I'm getting ready to go do this, going to do that. Okay. So, I mean, that was the whole reason why I kind of took that approach, like, hey, don't tell me about it till after the fact. So yeah, in a way for me, it was like, it's a very easy time in my life where I made sure I separated myself from back home because I wasn't here. Like, what am I going to do?
I think you answered all my questions, and I just want to thank you for sharing some of your personal stories with the listeners. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I just want to thank Phil again for taking time to chat with me today and talking about his own personal stories. Navicore Solutions also has some helpful resources about military pay and a pre-deployment checklist of financial aspects of your life you should take care of before you deploy. I'll put all that information in the description of this podcast, so if you're interested, you can check that out there. Phil also mentioned that it's not only important for people in the military to have a will and testament, but also regular people. We have some great information on that as well, so you can also find that in the description of this podcast. It's important to reiterate Phil's point about having a power of attorney while you're deployed. By having a trustworthy power of attorney, you're making sure your finances are secure while you can't oversee them every day like you normally would. I'm glad we were able to highlight Military Saves Month on the podcast this month and provide some great information about it to anyone who needs it. Thank you to everyone in the military for your service. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.